box office numbers are in for The Flash. It's in trouble, and after seeing it, it deserves to be. Now, this isn't unexpected. For weeks now, the press themselves have been preparing everyone for a soft opening box office. I love the attempted spin of using soft to mean we're going to lose millions of dollars, although the reason why that could happen entirely eludes me.
It's me, the Mad Goose Wizard.
With places hoping that it gets 155 million in the opening weekend, it's gonna really have to go gangbusters on the international box office, because domestically in the US, it's not doing that well. All in for Thursday previews, it got 9.7 million. And if you're anything like me, you're like, okay, but I have no idea what that means. So it's great then when people can put it into perspective for you. Like the Culture Crave showing us Guardians of the Galaxy, 17.5 million. Ant-Man 3, 17.5. Across the Spider-Verse, 17.3, and then The Flash at 9, or 9.7. Now, is The Flash as bad as Ant-Man? No, I don't think it is, but it does share a lot of the problems, and the people that lift it up aren't The Flash. When your main character is the one that shouldn't be in the movie, it really begs the question why it was made at all.
If I can't undo what I did, there might not be a future.
When you have people saying that Ezra Miller is simply the best casting you could not imagine, making his personal troubles not matter here, Miller is the real deal, and a superhero superstar is born. After seeing it, I just don't believe you, and it certainly won't make people forget what he's done. No, instead, I think we'll find that numbers matter more, and that unlike some critics, the audience will actually care about the quality of the movie, and won't be blinded by his arse. Because Ant-Man came in at 17.5 million on its opening day, coming in with 104 million in its domestic weekend, which really makes the difference here. Give a lot of credence to that 70 million domestic box office target that they've had for a while. The issue is, though, that despite getting 104 in its domestic weekend, it got 476 million in total, when it had a break-even point of $600 million, because it had a budget of 200 million. And that means The Flash is in trouble, because budget-wise, it has similar numbers, and yet in its initial numbers, it is nowhere close. Either everyone's saving Flash for the weekend, or word of mouth spreads about how incredible The Flash is, and it won't. Or DC are about to lose a lot of money, with The Flash being one of the most expensive movies in DC superhero history, supposedly having a budget of 220 million, which is 20 million more than Ant-Man did, and it's pulling in lower numbers. And we already know from things like Black Adam that after you've had reshoots, it increases your budget massively. The Flash has been delayed for years and has had multiple reshoots. If it's already unlikely it's going to break even with 220 million, imagine how much money they're going to lose after all of that is included. Because some people have claimed that all in, the price is closer to 300 million, if not higher. With those kind of figures, it's understandable why The Flash did this.
The Mad Goose Wizard.
Even on a good day, it'd have to hit 600 million to break even, which would involve thrashing Ant-Man Quantumania's figures, and it just isn't there. And how are the Ezra Miller fans taking the news? Cope and seethe, mainly. Yes, cope and seethe. The Flash exceeds expectations, rushes to 9.7 million, despite fanboy campaigns to ruin it. Yes, The Flash had such low expectations that we exceeded them, even as we pulled in half the numbers of Marvel trash. And I never knew there were fanboy campaigns to ruin this movie, because the movie does that all on its own. And I don't think it was helped by the marketing of this movie at all. If anything, it seems like they were trying to do a bait and switch, that they were telling everybody that this was the masterpiece of the century. And when you got to the cinema, yeah, you'd be disappointed, but they don't care. They've got your money anyway. I think that was their only hope. When you've got James Gunn coming out and saying it's one of the best superhero films he's ever seen. At this point, I can only assume it's because it's one of the superhero films he's seen. And so if we go far enough down the list, it's going to be one of the best eventually. But James Gunn's got a vested interest in it. What's stranger is when you've got stories of Tom Cruise calling him and spending 15 minutes praising the film. Well, you know, for the second half of the movie, you at least made Ezra Miller kind of approaching average a bit, so that was something. First half of the movie, entirely insufferable, but when you got other characters involved, kind of took the edge off. Is genuinely the best thing I can say about this movie. Yes, there were some scenes that I liked, but if you want comments about the movie as a whole, certainly anything that would fill up 15 minutes of talking about it in general, I have no idea what he could praise. Although when you hear what he said, he praised Andy, praised the film, and it feels good because they work really hard on it. Don't worry about it, love. I could work really hard on a painting and it'd still be crap as well. And I think one of the biggest signs that it was going to turn out that way is when we found out that Stephen King was a big fan of it. I don't really care about superhero movies, but this one is special. It's heartfelt. I could see the parts where that's meant to happen, but it does rely on you actually liking Ezra Miller, which, given the first half is an attempt at comedy, there's two of them. It's almost entirely Ezra Miller. One of them is even more insufferable than the one before. 4, and they still haven't taught him how to run. The first hour is simply an exercise in looking at your watch thinking, I can't believe I'm still here. This is a guy who runs as if he's doing an extremely inefficient front crawl with floppy feet, and the developers thought, you know what will make that look good? What happens if we drop the CGI and just have him run around the room normally for a bit? I didn't think you could make the Flash look worse until I saw that scene, and when I saw it, I don't know how he got through casting. Oh no, wait, oh, I know exactly how he got through casting. At no point in my life have I sat here and thought, you know what I want to see? Ezra Miller's arse. But thanks to good old Andy here, that's exactly what I got. In fact, Hollywood liked those scenes so much, he now gets to direct the next Batman film. Honestly, with entertainment like this, I can't imagine why so few people are reading comic books, or why they think transferring those tactics over to superhero movies won't have the same effects on that media as well. Because despite in the run-up to the movie, Ezra Miller being kept on the back burner, desperately trying to hide him, in the film, yeah, they don't do that. That's what I expected them to do. They don't do that. If anything, the first half of the movie is Ezra Miller indulgent. It puts him front and center, thinks he's funny, thinks he's entertaining, and it fails. I mean, yes, he does have his fans, such as the Variety article, which was basically a love letter at this point, but this is a person who described Barry ordering a peanut butter sandwich in the opening scene as mesmerizing. And that's a stupid enough statement when you haven't seen the movie, but when you go to see it, and it's just him, at a till, getting his wallet out and walking off. The only thing on my mind is, what on earth are you on about, mate? I can understand that you're probably far too busy admiring his sculpted dark eyebrows and insinuating lips, thinking about how he was a mesmerizing camera subject as he burnt his clothes off and was just swinging in the breeze. We were probably a few seconds from him doing a super speed windmill and generating enough electricity to power the western seaboard. The movie starts, as you probably know, with Barry's dad in prison for his mum's murder. He's been in there for many years at this point, and he's in his last chance court case coming up. To stop this, because Barry knows that he's going to stay in prison for the rest of his life, he decides to go back in time and save his mum. The problem is, with Barry's mum alive, he has no reason to strive, no pain to drive him forward, to make him achieve a new career. So new Barry coasts through life, doesn't really achieve anything, and somehow becomes even more insufferable than the original one. What follows is an hour of pain and misery. We are talking attempted comedy on the level of enhanced interrogation. I mean, Variety may think of this section as sort of an underwater comedy ballet. Life or death and cheeky, just like a crack superhero. With Ezra Miller, it's the voice that gets you. Miller is insouciant, irritated, irascible, and irresistible. No one has exhibited this level of psycho-flippancy, this antic dissociation from his own heroism, or as I would describe him, he's a bit of a div, an irritating, inescapable prat. The comedy never lands. We've got comments about how he's the janitor but always clearing up for Batman, or making jokes about how hungry he is and it's his stomach rumbling. Oh no, that's the building collapsing. Trust me, it's as funny as it sounds. There's also these really strange parts of Barry Allen where he's talking to somebody else, but you get the feeling that it's DC describing Ezra Miller to you, trying to make him appear as if he understands his problems, like he's self-deprecating, in order to get you to forgive him for his troubles in the past. After the initial scene, he says, falling can be psychologically damaging. You need to seek the help of a mental health professional, because the Justice League struggles with that. It just isn't there yet. Trust me on this. Having Ezra Miller, of all people, talk about that is a bit on the nose. There's also another scene where he's talking to himself, and he says, I'm sorry, I'm just not good with people. And the other guy replies to him, I know I'm a bit obnoxious, I just get overexcited. And I just can't help thinking that that's how they're trying to excuse this.
Whoa, bro.
You've got scenes of babies falling through the sky in absolutely terrible CGI throughout the entire movie. And in fact, the CGI was so bad, even DC couldn't defend it. The director himself couldn't defend it. He threw one desperate last chance, just hoping that the audience was as thick as he thought they were, by saying, no, the visuals were meant to look that bad. They look crap deliberately. I mean, it's a brave strategy. Let's see if it pays off. The DC Universe film can look a little weird at times, but don't you understand? Yes, Barry is annoying and the CGI is crap, but you only think it looks crap because you're just not clever enough to understand it. Essentially, the terrible CGI is going above your head. This is art, you see. In The Flash, we're creating a whole new visual language. Not just for when I hesitate to call what Barry Allen does in this movie running, to be honest. But the CGI isn't bad. No, everything is distorted in terms of lights and textures. We enter this water world, and it's part of the design. So if you think it looks weird, well, that's what we wanted it to be. It was intentional. Describing it as a water world is interesting language because that's exactly how Barry swims. Imagine running, but done by somebody who only has one brain cell, and you essentially get the exact motion. I thought his running looked bad in Justice League, but it's far worse in this movie. It's like he's exaggerated it even more. I don't know, maybe they're going to try and gaslight people about that as well, because that's what we're doing with the CGI, folks. If you see The Flash and think, wait, are those visual effects real? Did they finish that? The answer, whether you love it or hate it, is yes. Yes, they did. It was done on purpose. We made it so it wouldn't look like what a normal person would see. I'm going to use that for bad videos in the future if I put one out that nobody likes. I'm like, it's not my fault. It's not my fault. Yes, I know my mic was popping and the camera was zoomed up in the top right-hand corner, but don't you understand? This is art, folks. I'm inventing a whole new visual language here. You just can't appreciate the scientific nature of making YouTube videos. I never realized that pretentiousness could just be an excuse for bad work now. But The Flash has opened my eyes to a whole new range of possibilities. If you're wondering why I'm wearing a She-Hulk t-shirt, by the way, it's simply because I couldn't decide who's more annoying, She-Hulk or Barry Allen. I've been thinking about this question since the movie ended, and I still haven't been able to decide. And if you're wondering why you're thinking that, I was like, well, what else is to think of in the movie? Because I tell you what, there isn't a plot. What I've described about the movie is basically the plot right now. He saved his mum, he created another world, and then Zod turns up. Is there any plot there? I mean, well, he wants Supergirl. That's it. Zod's arrived, we need to stop Zod, is the plot. And the rest of the film is largely just time wasting. The movie is a bit like any kind of bad story. It is just and then, with every scene. To the point where you watch it all, get to the end, and you're like, what was the point of that? Why did I spend like 2.5 hours of my life going through this thing? If the point of a movie is to make you feel something, then it definitely did succeed. But only when it comes to being irritated. I got to the end, I was just kind of pissed off that I'd seen it at all. Even the actors don't seem that complimentary of the movie. Because Zod himself came out and was like, well, you know, I only play a minor part of the film. Which is true, he's in it for probably about 5 minutes. There isn't a plot bigger than I'm here for the codex. The character certainly doesn't have any depth or personality. He's not a villain that you will remember at all, because there's nothing to remember. And even himself has said that acting it wasn't very satisfying. Nor was watching it, mate. I know exactly how you feel. The multiverse movies are like somebody playing with action figures. It's like, here's this person, and they're fighting. Which is one of the greatest descriptions for the movie you can probably have. Here's a Flash, here's another Flash, here's Batman, here's Supergirl. Shall we run around for a bit? I think we should. Oh, it's over now. The first script for this movie was probably 2 pages, and then someone was like, you're gonna have to add a few more words to that, mate. Get them to talk a bit or something. He said it's not quite the in-depth character study that I felt Man of Steel was, but it's not Zod's story. I'm basically there to just present a challenge. And I'm not even sure that was true. I don't think he's really there to present a challenge. It's more an excuse. It was like, we know the events that we want to happen, but we just need an impetus to cause it. Let's just have Zod arrive. We'll just put it on a news report and then shove him in at the end for a few seconds. Because the story, unfortunately, does revolve around Ezra Miller. Luckily, they toned down the jokes when other characters start to arrive, which definitely takes the edge off the movie and moves it more into sort of mid, probably about a 4. There are some good scenes involved, largely involving Batman, which does mean that this movie might actually stand a possibility of being decent. The main scene I'm thinking of is, I'm pretty sure it's Batman's first fight. It's Batman taking on about 12 people, flying around all over the place. It's not quite as brutal as I would have preferred, but if I had to pick my favorite scene, that would have been it. Unfortunately, it's just not enough to even make a dent in the rest of the movie. There's a lot of very stupid things happening. Like there's one part where Batman decides to fire missiles at a shielded ship, and then he flies around, sees that it didn't do any damage to the ship because it's got a shield on it, and then just decides to fly himself into the ship. Why? You must have known by this point that you weren't going to do any damage to it because your missiles didn't, but also he had all the time in the world to eject and just thought, can't be bothered, mate. It made absolutely no sense, but that's one of the pivotal moments in the movie, because that's the moment that causes Barry Allen to start running back in time, where the two Flashes then face off against each other, because they're trying to stop this from happening. It just keeps happening because it's like a fixed point in time if you're a Doctor Who person. And one Barry refusing to give in essentially drives him insane and pits him against the original. Now after that fight, they do just reset the timeline, go back to the start and realize, oh, this isn't my kind of reality anyway. They essentially tried to pull a sort of standard Back to the Future storyline, ironically a film which is mentioned in The Flash itself. Now there is Supergirl in this movie as well, someone who also serves to take the edge off Ezra Miller. Basically, as much as you can water him down in the movie, the better it gets, because when he's around other people, it's not just the two Ezra Millers being being insufferable at each other, almost trying to compete on who can be worse than the other one. But Supergirl herself is kind of barely in the movie. And apart from one scene where she flies Barry Allen up into the sky to get hit by lightning, which largely had me thinking that's not how lightning works, for the rest of the very short time she's on screen, she's essentially just there to punch things. So again, another character who has no depth whatsoever. And as for the cameos, they didn't really leave an impact on me, but I'm not into that kind of stuff generally. I liked Michael Keaton as Batman, but that's because he's a full-fledged character in the movie. If you're just going to show someone on the screen for 30 seconds, I really don't care about it at all. Although bringing back people from the dead with PS2 graphics, it does seem in rather poor taste. So when it comes to marketing, I think hiding Ezra Miller was a very good strategy, because if he was put front and center, no one would have seen your movie. As it is, you're struggling. And while your other characters help to water down the Flash in the Flash movie, it's just not enough. What you end up with is a movie that's only there to kill time. Even at my most generous, I could only give it a 4. And that's largely because the first hour is tempered by the second half, and that's the bit that I remember the most. Even then, it's not pure sailing, because the Ezra Miller bit at the end, where they're starting to fight each other, goes right back to being as annoying as it was at first. So it's not like this movie got better as it went along. We sort of started miserably with a terrible Flash scene, jumped into a Batman / very fast Wonder Woman scene, which was great, then plummet through the earth into an enhanced interrogation for the rest of the hour, climb up to about a 4 as we start to get into the Batman and Supergirl scenes, and then drop off again for the ending. That's why 4 I would consider generous, because I could fully understand giving this a 3 or even a 2 at points. Now, overall, people have been a lot more generous than me, getting an all-audience score of 80%, coming in at a 6.3, or the top critics giving it a 6. To me, that's exceptionally generous, but I can understand some of the Barry Allen scenes giving Hollywood critics that extra little boost that they'd really enjoy. The Variety review makes a lot more sense now I've watched the movie, but if you remember at the start I said of its current numbers, something was going to have to change. People would have to plan to watch this over the weekend, or word of mouth would have to save it. And despite that 80%, I don't think a 6 is going to be a good enough word of mouth to save this movie, when we are so far behind what we'd need to be to still lose money. Ant-Man had a similar budget and lost movie, and so The Flash coming in lower is not looking good at all for DC. The Flash was supposed to be DC's big movie, the thing that saved the universe. Yes, it reset everything, but it was meant to lead in to James Gunn's new universe. This movie was meant to symbolize the end of the Snyderverse, but as that died, this was the lead-in to the next series. It should have been good. James Gunn had a vested interest in wanting this to be a success, because what is the end of one era is also the beginning of the next. I can understand why he said it's one of the best superhero films that he's seen, because he wanted people to go to the cinema, he wanted it to make money. But I think that's the wrong tactic to have. Getting people to go and see the movie only works if it's a good movie. If you get people to go, if you bait them, which is what I consider this to be, to go to the movie and it's awful, you just destroy your own reputation. Now, will most people care? Will most people remember? Probably not. But remember, Hollywood has relied on that before. They thought people would forget Ezra Miller's history, and I don't think there's any movie that would make people forget that. Certainly not this one. If your hope was to provide such a great performance that people would forgive you, well, yeah, that's not worked. Because quality performance, this isn't. But if your hope was to simply be so irritating in the movie that people will think of that first rather than the criminal record, now that I can see. Batman was the attempt to save this movie. The atmosphere of Batman I really liked. He had cool vehicles, great gadgets, and he was genuinely the high point of the movie. But even at its best, it just wasn't enough to balance out the rest of it. And I only really had 2 questions on my mind at the end of the movie. Why on earth did I spend my life watching that? And why was this not a Batman movie? You already had him on board. You could have just made a Michael Keaton Batman movie and made a lot of money. And instead, for some reason, you're obsessed with Ezra Miller. No matter what he does, he's bulletproof, although not in the movie. They already wrote a Flash sequel script before the movie was even released. Although, let's face it, with these numbers, they're not going to make that now. But with Michael Keaton, it was an actual possibility. You could have kept everyone else from the movie. All you had to do is drop the Flash. Although I can understand why you refused to. But if you stripped out Ezra Miller and expanded the other parts, I'm still not sure it would have been a good movie, but at least it would have been a better than average movie. Maybe work on that CGI a tad as well while you're there. At least you could have got people going, you know, I actually think this was a 6 out of 10. Rather than the debate I think people will be having of, where does this rank among the worst superhero movies? Because I don't think it's the worst, but it's definitely down there somewhere, and where exactly that lands for people will probably depend on how much they think Batman managed to save it. But those are just my thoughts. What are yours? Let me know down in the comments below. Like the video if you like the video. Subscribe for more videos like this in the future, and I will see you in the next one. And bye-bye.